could you?
Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you truly believed love alone could conquer everything? Until the very person you trusted most threw the wedding ring on the floor and walked away with your best friend. But here's a truth no one tells you. Not every love is worth holding on to. Amahle lost her husband, her home, and even her dignity, simply because she believed in the wrong person. And yet, a single glass of water from a stranger changed everything. This story is inspired by dozens of real women who were betrayed, abandoned, and left to rebuild from nothing. It's not just a tale, it's a journey of healing. Watch till the end and you'll discover why failure isn't the end, how to rise again even when you've lost it all, and how sometimes all it takes is one person who believes in you. Amahle, once rejected and forgotten, rose to become the co-founder of A&J Holdings. She bought back the very house she was thrown out of and turned it into a shelter for betrayed women. If you've ever found yourself in the dark like Amahle, this video might be your first light. Don't skip it, because sometimes one simple act of kindness is all it takes to save a soul. The candle flickered once, then again, casting trembling shadows on the cracked wall. The only sound in the room was the scrape of silver against porcelain. 1, 2, 3. Kwame cut through the grilled tilapia like it had offended him. Amahle watched him from across the rickety wooden table, her fork untouched, her pulse thudding louder than the rain outside. Then it came, sharp, final. Kwame pushed his chair back. The legs shrieked against the cement floor. He stood staring down at her like she was some stranger who had broken into his life. "I'm done," he said. Amahle blinked, thinking he meant the fish. But then, he reached into his pocket and pulled off his wedding band. The gold ring, once warm against her fingers, now looked cold and foreign in his hand. "I'm tired of this poverty," he muttered, low but deliberate. "You've dragged me down long enough." Before she could process, before she could even breathe, he dropped the ring. It hit the floor with a dull metallic thud, spun once on its edge, then toppled over, lifeless, final. Amahle stared at it. Her throat burned, not because of the words, but because of the silence after. It was always the silence that broke you. And then, footsteps, soft, deliberate, from the hallway. A figure emerged from the shadows, heels clicking on tile like a slow, taunting metronome. Zola, in their house. Zola, in silk, not bothering to smile, just casually stepping behind Kwame and placing her hand on his shoulder. Familiar, intimate, possessive. Amahle's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at Kwame. He didn't flinch. No guilt, no hesitation. "We've been together for a while now," Zola said, eyes sharp. "We didn't think you'd take it well, but you should have seen this coming." Amahle's legs trembled beneath the table. Zola walked over to the sideboard, the one Amahle's mother had left her, and picked up the manila folder that hadn't been there earlier. She dropped it on the table. Inside, documents, a deed, a bank statement, withdrawal slips, her name on every page, but all the signatures were Kwame's. Amahle flipped through with shaking hands. "You sold the house?" Her voice cracked. "You emptied our savings?" Kwame didn't answer. His face was stone. Amahle turned to Zola. "Why?" Zola shrugged. "Because I wanted what you didn't even know you had." Amahle stood, the chair scraping behind her. "I trusted you," she said, barely a whisper. "Exactly," Zola replied. "That's your problem." The room pulsed. The storm outside cracked louder. A flash of lightning lit up the kitchen window. In its harsh glare, the gold ring on the floor caught the light like a wound that refused to close. Amahle didn't scream. She didn't beg. She walked past them both, past the memory of dinners, birthdays, laughter, now ashes in her throat. At the door, she paused, barefoot. The wind was howling now. Rain fell in sheets. She opened the door. A gust blew in, scattering loose papers from the table. As she stepped outside, something sharp stung the ball of her foot. She looked down. The ring. Broken, split where it had struck the edge of the chair. She bent, picked up the jagged half, and stared at it as the rain soaked her hair, her blouse, her skin. Behind her, laughter, Zola, muffled, venomous. But Amahle didn't turn back. She walked, one step, then another, bare feet slapping against wet concrete. The neighborhood was dark. Power outage again. Only the glow of a far-off street lamp shimmered through the rain. She walked until her blouse clung like second skin, until her breath fogged in the night air, until the world became quiet. There, beneath the old market awning, she stopped. The last piece of her life still clutched in her palm, the broken ring, the symbol of everything that had failed her. She knelt, touched it to her lips, not in farewell, but in recognition. And then she let it fall. The rain swallowed it instantly. Thunder rumbled, distant but heavy. Her voice was barely audible, but the heavens heard it. If this is the end, then God, let it also be the beginning. She leaned back against the corrugated wall, eyes wide open. There was no one. Only the sound of storm, the scent of iron in the air, the faint taste of salt on her lips. But something had shifted. A silence cracked open inside her, not emptiness, but space. Space for something new. Behind her, the market stalls shivered in the wind. A plastic tarp fluttered violently and tore free. Somewhere, a metal sign clanged against its hinges. Amahle didn't move. She just breathed, not like a woman abandoned, but like a woman awakening. And so ended the dinner that broke her, and began something else entirely. Her phone vibrated once. The light from the screen pierced the shadows under the tin roof, casting a pale glow on Amahle's rain-soaked knees. She looked down. The message blinked through the blur. Your account balance is 0.0 ZAR. She blinked once, twice. The numbers didn't change. A single droplet of water fell from her elbow and splashed onto the screen, as if the storm itself was laughing. A second vibration followed. This time, a voice message from the landlord. She didn't need to play it to know what it meant. She tapped it anyway. His tone was clipped, careful. Due to credit risk concerns, and after hearing about certain behaviors, I'm afraid we'll be terminating your lease, effective immediately. Amahle didn't move. The hum of the rain on the corrugated metal above her head filled the silence. Somewhere behind the closed stalls of the market, a dog barked once, then went quiet. She sat on the edge of a cracked concrete step, legs pulled tight to her chest, soaked to the bone. A plastic grocery bag rested beside her, containing all that was left. A scarf, a broken phone charger, a photo album wrapped in cloth, and a wedding photo. She pulled it out with numb fingers. There they were, frozen in time. Her and Kwame beneath the acacia tree, smiling, eyes closed, hands interlocked. She stared at her face. Something about it felt foreign now. The longer she looked, the more the ink began to blur. Rain leaked through the bag, staining the paper, melting memories like watercolor. His face washed away first. Only hers remained. The streetlights flickered once, then died. She was alone in the dark. A gust of wind rushed through the corridor between the stalls. The tarps flapped like wings trying to escape. Somewhere behind her, a child coughed in the distance, raw and rasping. Amahle tucked the photo back in, wrapping the cloth tight. She stood. The concrete was cold under her soles. Her blouse clung to her ribs, the kind of wet that wasn't just from rain, but from being forgotten. She wandered toward the back of the market where a faded sign read, "Help Wanted, Waitstaff, Evenings and Weekends." The same sign she'd passed every day. She stepped inside. The air smelled like fried meat and cheap cleaning spray. A fan buzzed weakly above the counter. The owner, a short woman with thick glasses and a tired mouth, looked up from her ledger. Amahle cleared her throat. "I saw the sign." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Experience?" Amahle nodded. "Years. You're the one from the video." Amahle froze. "What video?" The woman turned her tablet screen around. There she was, blurry footage from a restaurant months ago, her apron on, her hands full of plates, then the voiceover, added by someone else. This woman stole from her husband and plays innocent. Be careful who you trust around your wallet. She stepped back as if the screen had slapped her. That's not true, she whispered. The woman shrugged. It doesn't matter. People already saw it. Amahle turned to leave. Behind her, the woman called out, It's not personal. That was the worst part. It never was. She walked until her feet ached. The market turned into alley, the alley into street, the street into noise. Everything was full, and yet she was invisible. At the taxi stand, a man in a uniform stepped forward. Miss, we're clearing out. Can't let people sleep here anymore. She nodded. He waited, then quietly held out an umbrella. Amahle didn't take it. Instead, she walked back into the storm. By the time she reached the vendor's awning again, the sky had grown darker. The lights had not returned. The air was heavy with humidity and rot. She sat, pulled the wedding photo back out. She stared at it, at what used to be. Then she tore it in half. The sound was clean. One side showed half a smile, hers. The other, nothing, just a smear of fading ink and the ghost of a shoulder. She kept the half with her face. The rest she placed gently on the ground just outside the awning. The rain took it, piece by piece, like it had been waiting. She sat there, breathing through her mouth, tasting the iron of memory, a slow, metallic grief that didn't roar but dripped. And then, quiet, too quiet. She looked up. No more footsteps, no more messages, just the soft hum of nothing. She curled tighter. The ache in her back was sharper now, the kind of ache that had no source, only weight. The cloth bag pressed against her ribs. She didn't cry. She didn't have tears left for that. She just whispered, not to God, not to herself, but to the dark that sat beside her like a shadow made of skin. No one's coming. The words hung there, brittle, until the night swallowed them. She stayed that way for a long time, maybe hours, maybe minutes. Time didn't tick when no one waited. Then, a soft creak, a small, silent gesture from the world. A loose sign above her tilted under the weight of rainwater and dropped with a splatter beside her. It startled a pigeon from its perch. The flapping wings rushed upward into the dark like something finally choosing to leave. Amahle looked up. No stars. No moon. Just the glisten of water on the pavement, reflecting a sky that had nothing left to offer. She pressed the torn photo to her chest, not out of love but ritual. Then she lay down. The concrete was wet but steady. Her breath slowed. In her hand, she clutched the half that remained. A face, her own, but different now. Eyes open, mouth firm. The woman in the photo didn't look defeated. She looked stripped. And beneath that stripping, something waited. Not forgiveness, not hope, but space. Room enough for something new. Amahle closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to feel. The rain slowed. The wind shifted. And for one fragile second, she almost believed that maybe, just maybe, emptiness could be a kind of beginning. Her lips cracked before her eyes opened. Tongue thick, skin burning, a pressure at the base of her skull pulsing like a second heartbeat. Amahle was lying on hot pavement. The sun carved through her eyelids like knives. Light bounced off glass and metal, fractured into spears of white heat that pierced through the fog in her head. She tried to lift her arm, failed. The air tasted like asphalt and rust. Somewhere nearby, a car honked. Voices passed. A footstep stopped, then kept going. No one slowed. No one saw her. Her chest moved shallow once, again. Then, wetness. Cool. A sound. Glass meeting concrete. Amahle forced her eyes open. A hand was holding out a cup. Condensation clung to the outside. The plastic shimmered in the light. Inside, clear water, clean, still, not tap. She blinked again and the blur took shape. A man, dark-skinned, mid-30s maybe, linen shirt, sleeves rolled, wrists scarred like old ropes had once rested there, his face unreadable, but his eyes, they were not. They were tired and kind. She reached for the cup. Her fingers trembled. He didn't speak, just watched. She drank. Each swallow was slow, heavy, but she didn't stop. Not until the cup was empty. The man crouched down beside her, arms on his knees. "You've had better days," he said. His voice was deep, not the kind that tried to soothe, the kind that let silence breathe. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Amahle tried to sit up straighter, suddenly aware of how she must look. Her blouse still stained from the rain, her skirt creased, hair tangled against her jaw. "I didn't faint," she said. He didn't argue. "Do you always offer water to strangers?" "Only when they look like they might disappear." She looked away. The wind lifted a sheet of old newspaper beside them. A headline caught her eye. Something about inflation, another statistic she no longer belonged to. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once, then sat down fully on the edge of the curb beside her, as if they'd known each other all their lives. For a while, they said nothing, just shared heat and space and whatever passed for mercy on a street like this. "I'm Jabari," he said finally. Amahle didn't answer. Then, Amahle, a small thing, but hers. He didn't flinch at the name, didn't ask why she was on the ground or why her eyes looked older than her face. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped sandwich, held it out. "Eat." She hesitated. "I don't need your pity." "Good, I don't offer it." Their eyes locked. Then finally, she took the sandwich. The bread was soft. Chicken. Spiced. Too seasoned for her raw stomach, but she chewed anyway. "You're not from this part of town," she said between bites. "No." "What brings you here?" He pointed at the broken street sign above them. "I used to live 2 blocks from here, long time ago." She raised an eyebrow. "Moved up?" He tilted his head. "Moved through." She waited. He didn't explain further. Instead, he looked up at the sky. "You ever watch people walk past you like you're not even there?" Amahle didn't answer. She didn't have to. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out something small. A folded napkin, inside it a pin. A metal butterfly, old, the wings slightly bent, one side painted blue, the other scratched bare. He placed it in her hand. She stared at it. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you still drank the water," he said. She looked up. He held her gaze. "If you had enough strength to do that, you have enough to start again." He stood. She watched him walk away, his back straight, no rush, just certainty. She looked down at the butterfly. Its wings shimmered in the light like it had something to say. Then she stood. That afternoon, Amahle wandered until her legs steadied under her again. The wind had picked up. The city smelled like dust and oil and old smoke. At a bus stop, a tattered flyer caught her eye. "Free business skills training, women only, no ID required, no experience needed." She tore it off the pole. In her hand, the butterfly pin rested quietly. That night, she found a shelter near the train tracks. The beds were thin and close, and the air smelled like bleach and sweat. But no one asked questions. That was enough. She clutched the flyer to her chest like a passport, and she waited for morning. By the time the sun rose, her feet were already moving. The building was older than the flyer made it sound, cracks in the steps, paint peeling from the railing. But inside, it was alive. Women, all ages, talking, laughing, some nervous, some hardened. Amahle signed up for a spot. A woman named Thandi handed her a clipboard. "Why are you here?" she asked. Amahle thought for a long time, then wrote, "To learn how to survive without fear." That evening, she sat on the floor of the dormitory, legs crossed, and placed the butterfly on the windowsill. Beyond the glass, the city pulsed. Behind her, someone snored. But in her chest, quiet. Not the kind that hurt, the kind that builds. The butterfly caught the last light of the day, casting a faint shimmer on the wall behind her. A shadow with wings. She pressed her fingers to the pin, and for the first time in weeks, she whispered something not to the world, but to herself. "If I begin again, let me do it on my own feet." Outside, the wind carried dust across the street. The sky faded into indigo, and Amahle sat in the darkness, drinking in silence like it was the only thing that ever made her feel full. The scissors glinted like a blade of ice. Amahle stood in the cramped room under a single yellow bulb. The walls were the color of old parchment, stained by damp. A cracked mirror leaned against the wall, its edges chipped. Her reflection flickered, fragmented by the flaws in the glass. She lifted a lock of her hair. It was heavy, wet from the shower at the shelter. Strands clung to her fingers. The first snip sounded louder than she expected. Hair fell across her palm like a dead thing. Another snip, another. By the third cut, she felt her hands steady, not tremble. The mirror showed a woman stripping off a skin she no longer wanted. Strands dropped to the floor, dark coils curling like question marks. Behind her, the dormitory hummed. A baby whimpered in a cot. Someone coughed. A kettle hissed on a hot plate. Life went on. But inside this small room, time slowed. She stared at herself. The hair that had once been her shield, her soft curtain, now gone to jagged tufts around her face. Her eyes seemed larger, her neck bare. Her skin felt new under the harsh light. A gust from the open window stirred the fallen hair. It swirled like ash. She reached into her bag and pulled out the butterfly pin Jabari had given her. She held it up to the light. Its scratched wings caught a shimmer of yellow from the bulb. She pressed it to her lips. A cool metal kiss. Outside, a car backfired. The sound jolted her. The pin slipped from her fingers, clinking against the floor and rolling under the bed. She crouched to retrieve it. Her fingers brushed something else, an envelope wedged against the wall. Thick, crumpled. She pulled it free. Inside were pages, typed, faded. She unfolded one. Business Principles for Beginners. Free workshop material. Her breath caught. Someone had left it there, or maybe forgotten, or maybe meant it for her. She read the first page standing barefoot on the cold floor. Words about budgeting, planning, building. She didn't understand everything, but she underlined with her fingernail as if the grooves would stay in her skin. She sat on the edge of the bed. The paper trembled between her hands. The butterfly pin lay in her lap. For the first time in months, the two things she held, knowledge and symbol, felt like tools, not trinkets. A knock at the door. She turned. Jabari stood in the hallway, leaning on the frame. He wore the same linen shirt, rolled at the sleeves. His eyes flicked to her hair, then back to her face. "No one forced me," she said before he could speak. He stepped inside, quiet. "I didn't think they did," he replied. She held up the pages. "I found this under the bed." He smiled faintly. "I left them there." Her heart thudded. "Why?" "Because you looked like someone who might read them." She set the papers down. "You said you lost everything once." He nodded. "Was it because of someone you trusted?" He nodded again. "And yet you still trust strangers enough to leave them things?" He tilted his head. "Trust isn't about safety. It's about building a world where someone else can start." His words hung in the small room, not as a lecture, more like a door opening. She looked back at the mirror, the jagged hair, the eyes, the space where an old self used to stand. "I want to learn," she said. "Then come tomorrow," he replied. "There's a bookstore across town. They let me use a corner in the evenings. It's quieter than here." She hesitated. "Why me?" He shrugged. "Because you showed up." That night, she didn't sleep. She sat cross-legged on the floor, the butterfly pin in her palm, the pages spread before her like maps. She read until her eyes blurred. She copied lines onto scraps of paper. She whispered definitions under her breath as if casting spells. By dawn, her fingers were ink-stained from the borrowed pen. When the first bus honked outside, she rose, dressed, and tied a scarf over her short hair. The city air smelled of diesel and bread from the early bakeries. She walked to the bookstore. It was older than she imagined. Dusty shelves, yellow light, wooden floors creaking underfoot. The smell of paper and old glue clung to the air. In the back corner, a table with two chairs, a small lamp, a notebook. Jabari sat waiting, flipping through a ledger. She slid into the seat. For the next hour, he spoke little. He showed her how to read a balance sheet, how to see not just numbers, but flows, directions, traps. He told her stories about mistakes that cost him everything. He did not soften them. He laid them bare. She wrote notes, her handwriting uneven but urgent. At one point, she stopped, pen hovering. He looked up. "What?" She shook her head. "It's just, no one ever taught me things like this without asking for something back." He smiled wryly. "Then maybe it's time someone did." The lamp cast a halo over the table. Dust floated through the beam like tiny ghosts. Outside the window, children passed carrying bread. The city buzzed, but in here, time felt slower. She stayed until the shopkeeper closed the shutters. As she left, she slipped the butterfly pin into her hair. It felt lighter now against her scalp. That evening, she climbed the narrow stairs back to the dormitory. She paused at the landing and looked out at the street. Neon signs flickered. A bus hissed to a stop. People moved like currents. She pressed the pin tighter. Her stomach ached from hunger, but her heart felt full. In her mind, she saw the woman in the mirror from the morning. Short hair, bare neck, eyes steady. That woman didn't seem lost anymore. She stepped inside the room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. She spread the workshop pages out again, smoothing the creases with her palm. She whispered the last line she had copied. When you emerge from the cocoon, the world won't recognize you. That's not a loss. It's a beginning. Her throat tightened. She looked out the window where the night wind moved the curtain like a slow breath. Down in the street, a stray dog padded along, shaking off rain, tail wagging at no one. Amahle whispered, "I'm coming back." The words surprised her. Not a promise to anyone else, a promise to herself. And as the bulb flickered, the butterfly pin cast a small, crooked shadow with wings that seemed to move. A voice cut through the room like a blade. "So let me get this straight. You think trauma qualifies as strategy?" The other student snickered. The woman who'd spoken leaned back in her chair, legs crossed, eyes cold, red lips, sharp heels, confidence polished to perfection. Amahle sat 2 rows back. Her notebook was open, pen frozen mid-sentence. She could feel the heat creep up her neck. The instructor didn't intervene. The woman turned, her words aimed now. "What gives you the right to speak like you've led anything but misery?" The room fell quiet. Amahle rose. She did it slowly, no anger, no trembling, just stood. "I'm not here to impress you," she said. The woman raised an eyebrow. "I'm here because I lost everything," Amahle continued. "And still, I'm standing. That's all the strategy I need." Silence. A moment passed, then another. The instructor cleared his throat and moved on. But something had shifted. Later, in the hallway, someone touched her arm. A soft gesture. Another student. Young, eyes kind. "You didn't have to defend yourself," she whispered. Amahle smiled. "That's where you're wrong." That afternoon, she stayed after class, reviewing the pitch guidelines on the bulletin board. Finalists would be chosen blind, no names, just numbers. Judged by a panel, 2 business leaders, 1 anonymous donor. She studied the criteria: feasibility, impact, originality, sustainability. The words read like math but felt like blood. She walked back to the shelter through the alley behind the mosque, where jasmine bloomed through rusted grates. The scent followed her, sweet, sharp. Inside her room, she laid out everything she had: scraps of notes, torn newspaper clippings, pages from Jabari's old handouts, her own rough drawings. She pulled the old shoebox from under the bed. Inside was the torn half of her wedding photo, her own face, still dry after all the rain. She placed it beside the butterfly pin and opened a clean page in her notebook. At the top, she wrote, "Business plan, second breath." She began with what she knew: survival, how to turn pain into resource. She outlined a micro-kitchen model, low-cost startup, community-based, training vulnerable women to serve affordable, nutritious meals in underfed zones of the city. Every plate served would be stamped with the motto, "Eat, heal, rise." She wrote until her fingers cramped. For days, she refined. She met with Jabari in the bookstore, asking questions she'd once been afraid to speak aloud. "How do I forecast overhead in zones without fixed rent?" He looked at her differently now, not like a student, but like someone building a thing that could last. He taught her how to write pitch budgets that made sense, how to calculate risk, how to protect her idea before sharing it. He never touched her, never praised her out of pity. But one evening, when she closed her notebook and sighed in frustration, he said, "You've already built something stronger than a pitch." She looked up. "Yourself." She didn't reply, but later, in her room, she rewrote the tagline at the top of the page. "This is not just about business, it's about breath." Submission day came. She printed the plan at the corner shop using coins she'd saved from skipping lunch. The paper came out slightly crooked. She smoothed it flat with her palms. The cover bore no name, just a number, randomized by the system. She slipped it into the drop box. As she turned to leave, a man entered, wearing a suit, talking on the phone. She paused. He glanced at her, then looked away. Familiar. Something in his walk, the tension between his shoulders. She shook it off. 3 days passed. No results. She tried not to check her email, tried not to imagine the judges reading her words and laughing. Then, on the 4th morning, her inbox pinged. Subject: "Congratulations, finalist, were 321. Her hand flew to her mouth. She read the message again, then again. A silent scream rose in her throat, then collapsed into laughter. She pressed her forehead to the wall, whispered, "I'm not invisible anymore." Later that night, when the shelter lights dimmed, she took out the torn photo. This time she didn't cry. She placed it into a small box beside the butterfly pin and a copy of her printed pitch. Then she whispered into the dark, "Thank you for leaving me nothing, so I could build everything." The moonlight through the window washed across her bed, soft and silver. She didn't sleep. She lay awake, eyes open, watching shadows shift like waves across the ceiling. Not afraid, just waiting and ready. The chandeliers pulsed like upside-down fire, 100 crystals catching the light, refracting it into sharp daggers across the marble floor. The air was thick with perfume and ambition. Amahle stepped through the doorway. The silence was immediate. The string quartet stopped mid-measure. Champagne flutes paused halfway to lips, heads turned. She didn't flinch. Her gown was simple, midnight blue, the neckline elegant. Her hair slicked back, a small silver butterfly pin glinting just above her left ear. Beside her, Jabari adjusted the cuff of his black tailored suit. His hand grazed the small of her back. Not possessive, just grounding. They moved forward. Not fast, not slow. Each step echoing on tile like a heartbeat amplified. On the far end of the ballroom, behind a row of sponsors and socialites, Zola froze mid-sip. Her red dress clung too tightly tonight. Her skin looked powdered too heavily. Her smile cracked as her eyes widened. Kwame stood next to her, a drink in one hand, his phone in the other. He turned at the shift in atmosphere. His eyes landed on Amahle, and time fractured. He didn't speak, didn't blink. Zola recovered first. She leaned into him, laughed louder than necessary. Amahle didn't change course. The floor parted for her like silk splitting at the seams. They reached the center of the ballroom just as the MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man announced, his voice rich, rehearsed. "Tonight, we honor innovation, resilience, and rising stars. Please welcome the finalists of this year's pitch challenge." Applause rose, scattered at first, then growing. Amahle stood still. She didn't need the spotlight to find her. It was already there. The MC continued. "Our top honor this year goes to a venture that captured all 3 judges, community-driven, scalable, and born from lived experience. The founder is none other than..." A pause, a ripple of breath. Amahle Dlamini, co-founder of Second Breath Initiative and partner at A&J Holdings. The ballroom erupted, or rather, it tried to, because half the room applauded. The other half turned to find the source of the name that had once been a whisper of pity, a ghost in old gossip threads. Amahle stepped forward. 1 step, 2. At the edge of the crowd, Zola shoved her glass into an attendant's hand and hissed something into her phone. Then she pulled it out and hit play. The speakers near the bar crackled. Amahle's voice, years younger, timid, floated through the space. "Yes, sir, I'll bring the order now. I'm sorry I took so long." It was footage, blurry, old, from her days waiting tables. The angle was wrong, the audio distorted. Then another voice, Kwame's, mocking, cruel. "You're lucky I keep you around at all." The room quieted, eyes turned again. Zola lifted her chin. "It's important," she called, "that we know where people come from." But just then, the screen behind the stage lit up. The logo appeared, A&J Holdings. Amahle's pitch deck, photos of meals being served to undernourished children, women in aprons smiling, a kitchen rebuilt from rubble, the motto in gold, "Eat, heal, rise." Then beneath it, sponsored by tonight's presenting donor, The MC cleared his throat, smiling nervously. As you can see, this year's top donor is the very organization co-founded by Ms. Amahle Dlamini. The crowd stirred. A man from the board stood. A&J Holdings underwrote 60% of the mentorship program, including the marketing fund that helped promote several of tonight's guests. Zola's hand dropped. Quam turned to her, eyes narrowing. You knew? She didn't answer. Someone in the crowd clapped. Then another, and another, until it became thunder. Amahle didn't smile. She stood still. Let it wash over her like the first clean rain. When it quieted, she walked toward the table at the side of the ballroom, picked up a single glass of water, turned back. Kwame approached. His steps were unsteady, shoulders sagging. Not from drink, but from shame. He stopped in front of her, eyes wet, voice low. I was wrong. She said nothing. Back then, he continued, I was scared, weak. You didn't deserve any of it. She stared at him, then handed him the glass of water. He took it, confused. She tilted her head. Drink. He did. When he finished, she whispered, Now imagine that was all you had. He closed his eyes. Behind them, the music resumed, softer now, not to entertain, but to comfort. Amahle turned away. Zola was gone. The space she'd occupied left no shadow. Jabari waited near the staircase, watching, silent. Amahle joined him. Ready, he asked? She nodded. They stepped outside into the warm night air. The sky above was clear, the moon a perfect scar over the city. As they walked, she loosened the pin from her hair and placed it in her palm. It shimmered under the street lamp. Behind them, laughter and glass and jazz rose faintly. But in front of them, only open road. She looked at Jabari. I didn't come to win, she said. I came to be seen. He held her gaze. You were. She exhaled, long, soft, then whispered what her heart had known the whole night. I'm not afraid of where I came from. I'm just no longer owned by it. And the butterfly in her hand caught the wind. The box was unmarked, wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with a string, no sender, no note. Amahle stared at it on her doorstep. She lived in a small flat now, 2 rooms and a balcony that caught the sunrise, the kind of place where light mattered more than space. She crouched and ran her fingers over the string. Inside, she found a folder, and inside the folder, an application. Yellowed. Her name handwritten in cursive, a stamp in the corner, accepted. It was the scholarship she'd applied for years ago, the one that never came, the one that could have changed everything had it arrived in time. Her hands trembled. At the bottom of the form, a donor's signature was blacked out, but the fund name was there, the Sankofa Trust. She had seen that name before. She walked to her bookshelf, pulled down the program from the gala where she'd first presented her pitch, flipped past pages of glossy ads and donor acknowledgments. There it was again. The Sankofa Trust, major contributor via A&J Holdings. She stared, then picked up her phone. Jabari answered on the second ring. Was it you? A pause. Not exactly, he said. I found the folder. He exhaled. I didn't create the trust. I joined it years later. But when I saw your name on that list, I knew who you were. The night of the presentation just confirmed it. She sat on the edge of her bed. You knew before I walked on stage. I suspected. Why didn't you tell me? Because this isn't about me, he said. It never was. Silence. Then she asked, why didn't you stop helping once you knew? His answer came quiet. Because helping isn't the same as saving. She closed her eyes. That afternoon, they met at a quiet cafe near the Botanical Gardens. He brought a small envelope. Inside, an old receipt. From a deed office. Her name was on it. Her old house. The one she'd been thrown out of barefoot, ring shattered beneath her heel. She looked at him. I don't understand. He stirred his tea. After you left, it sat empty. Changed hands twice. I tracked it down last year. Bought it under a silent holding company. When you were ready, I planned to give it back. Her hands clenched. But I don't want to live in that house. I didn't think you would. She looked up. What am I supposed to do with it? His eyes held steady. Whatever you want. That night, she went to see it. The street hadn't changed. Still narrow, still lined with jacaranda trees shedding purple petals that stuck to the sidewalk like bruises. The house was smaller than she remembered. The gate creaked. The garden had died. Inside, dust lay like a second skin on the floorboards. She walked from room to room in silence. In the kitchen, she sat on the same spot where he had once dropped the ring. She didn't cry. She breathed. Then she made a call. 3 months later, the house opened its doors again. Not for her, but for the women like her. The walls were painted soft yellow now, the curtains handmade by the first residents, the floors scrubbed, the kitchen full. Above the entryway, a sign, "The First Glass, Shelter for Women Rising." The butterfly pin was framed in glass near the door, not as a decoration, but as a promise. Amahle stood in the garden one morning, watching the new arrivals settle in. A girl in her 20s with a black eye, a mother with 2 small children, a woman older than them all, still silent after 3 days. Amahle didn't push them. She just showed them the kitchen, the courtyard, the room full of books, and the water dispenser, cold, clean, a note taped above it. "If you can drink this, you can start again." Later, she sat beneath the jacaranda tree. Jabari joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. She took hers, sipped. Do they know it used to be mine? No. Should they? Only if it helps them. She nodded, then reached into her bag and pulled out the box. Inside, the butterfly pin. She pressed it into his palm. "You kept me invisible long enough to find my own voice," she said. He looked down at the pin, "And you turned silence into a home." They didn't speak for a while after that, just listened. The tree above them shed petals again. They landed in her tea, purple, fragile. She didn't brush them away. That night, before bed, Amahle lit a small candle in the front room of the shelter. She placed it beside the photo she'd finally allowed someone to take, her holding hands with the first 5 women who called this place home. The caption read, "This is what second chances look like." And as the flame flickered, her voice echoed faintly in her chest. "I was never meant to be rescued. I was meant to rise." The ocean did not whisper. It roared. Waves collided with the shore in slow, thunderous rhythm, pulling sand into breathless spirals before hurling it back. Amahle stood barefoot on the wet sand, her white dress pressed against her calves, the hem soaked and heavy. A breeze lifted the edges like wings. On her chest, pinned just above her heart, shimmered a butterfly. Not silver, not metal, fabric, hand-stitched by one of the women from the shelter. Soft blue threads veined with gold, resting over the pulse of where everything began and everything came undone. The sky was still dark behind her, but the horizon burned with the soft glow of morning. That violet hush before the light arrives fully, the kind of hour where prayers are spoken quietly, or not at all. She turned toward the sound of laughter. The women from the house stood a few yards away, surrounding a makeshift table decorated with strings of paper butterflies and empty glasses waiting to be filled. Some wore headscarves, others didn't. Some held babies. One held a notebook. Amahle walked toward them slowly, letting the sand shift beneath her heels. Jabari waited at the edge of the circle. His suit was wrinkled. He had barely slept. She could tell. But his eyes held the calm of someone who had stopped chasing peace and started offering it. She nodded to him once. He nodded back. Amahle stepped up onto a smooth stone that served as a platform. No microphone, no grand announcement. Just the ocean behind her, the women before her, and the weight of everything she had once been balanced in her lungs. She looked out at them. "You all know where I started," she said, her voice clear, carried by the wind. "You've lived it too. Maybe worse, maybe quieter. But the silence is always the same." They listened. They knew. She reached down and picked up a pitcher of water, clear, cold. Beads of condensation running down its sides like veins. "This," she said, raising it, "was once the only thing I was given when I was collapsing in the street. No words, no questions, just a glass of water." She filled the first glass, then the second, one by one. Each woman stepped forward, took a glass, held it. Some drank, some didn't, but they all understood. When the last cup was passed, Amahle turned toward the banner behind her. The first glass. She nodded, then stepped back. The sea wind tangled through her hair. Someone began to clap, slowly at first, then more joined. Not applause for spectacle. Applause for survival. Later, as the sky lightened fully, a journalist approached with a notepad and eyes too eager. "Why that name?" she asked. Amahle smiled softly. "Because sometimes," she said, "a single glass of clean water can rescue a soul from disappearing." The woman blinked. Amahle walked away before she could ask anything else. She sat on the rocks alone as the women returned to the shelter with their children and their stories, and the beginnings of other lives. Jabari joined her. He handed her a small notebook. She opened it. Inside was a quote he'd written in his looping hand. "Don't build monuments to pain, build doorways." She exhaled, then laughed once, not loudly but deeply. He looked at her. "What are you thinking?" She turned her gaze toward the horizon. "That no one is born to be a victim. We are born to rise, again and again." She stood, let the tide kiss her toes. Then she took off her shoes, stepped into the water, and walked just far enough for the ocean to wash the edge of her dress clean. She stood there a while, letting the world see her, letting herself see the world. And when she turned back, the sun had climbed higher. The sea behind her burned gold, and her path on the sand had already begun to fade. There are stories we tell to remember who we are, and then there are stories we live through, quietly, painfully, just to prove we still exist. Sometimes it isn't the loud victories or grand gestures that shape us. It's the silence after loss, the breath we take when no one is watching, the decision to get up, not because we are ready, but because staying down has become heavier than rising. This was a story about resilience, not revenge, about the kind of strength that doesn't break walls but plants seeds, the kind that doesn't scream in anger but whispers in grace. It's about what happens when dignity is stripped, trust is shattered, and hope feels like a stranger, and yet somehow a spark survives. Because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it begins with a glass of water. Sometimes it begins with a hand reaching toward a locked door. And sometimes it begins alone, in the dark, with nothing but the stubborn heartbeat of one more try. There is a kind of rebirth that doesn't come with celebration, but with stillness. A kind of power that doesn't dominate, but uplifts. And a kind of justice that isn't revenge, but renewal. So wherever you are in your own journey, whether rebuilding, beginning, or just breathing, know this: you are not where you fell. You are where you rise. Thank you for walking through this story with us. If it touched you in some way, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and don't forget to follow or subscribe to stay connected. Your voice matters here, because sometimes a single word from a stranger is all it takes to remind someone else they're not alone. Until next time, breathe deep, stand tall, and rise again.